What actually happens inside your body the moment protein stops being your ally and quietly becomes your burden? I am 97 years old now, and if there is one mistake I made in the middle years of my life, it was believing that more of a good thing must always be better. Protein was praised as strength, as longevity, as the foundation of muscle and vitality. And so, like many others, I leaned into it. More eggs, more meat, more powders stirred into drinks that promised youth in every sip. But the body is not impressed by promises. It only responds to balance. Let me take you straight to the truth I learned too late. Your body does not store protein the way it stores fat or carbohydrates. There is no reserve tank waiting to hold the excess. Every gram beyond what your body needs must be processed, transformed, and ultimately disposed of. And that is where the quiet chain reaction begins. When you consume protein, it is broken down into amino acids, the building blocks your body uses for repair, hormones, enzymes, and tissue maintenance. But when the supply exceeds the demand, those amino acids cannot simply sit idle. Your liver steps in first, performing a process called deamination, stripping away the nitrogen component. This nitrogen is then converted into urea, a compound that must be safely excreted. Already, you can see the shift. What began as nourishment becomes metabolic work. I remember feeling proud of my discipline back then. High-protein meals, strict routines, but I also remember the subtle signals I ignored. I felt thirstier than usual, though I didn't understand why. Now I know. Processing excess protein increases the production of urea, and your body requires more water to flush it out through the kidneys. Without enough hydration, this process becomes strained, like asking a river to carry more waste with less water. And the kidneys, my dear listener, are not machines without limits. They filter your blood tirelessly, removing waste products like urea. But when protein intake is consistently high, the filtration load increases. It does not mean immediate failure, no, but it does mean sustained pressure. Over time, that pressure can matter, especially in a body that is no longer young. But perhaps the most deceptive part of excess protein is how it disguises itself as discipline. You feel full, satisfied, even virtuous, yet beneath that surface, your metabolism is working harder than necessary. Some of that excess protein may even be converted into glucose through gluconeogenesis or stored as fat if energy intake surpasses what your body burns. So the very thing you believed was lean can quietly contribute to imbalance. At 97, I have learned that the body speaks in whispers long before it ever screams. Too much protein is not a dramatic event. It is a gradual shift, a subtle overloading of systems designed for precision, not excess. And if you listen closely, as I did not, you will begin to understand that health is not built on extremes, but on respect for the limits your body has always tried to show you. I want you to understand something clearly, because this is where most people misunderstand the story of protein. The problem is not protein itself. Protein is essential, foundational, and deeply intelligent in how it serves the body. The problem begins the moment intake exceeds physiological demand, because from that point forward, Every extra gram becomes a task your body must manage, not a gift it can use. And the body, despite its resilience, operates on systems that were designed for efficiency, not excess. Let me walk you through what truly happens, step by step, the way I wish someone had explained it to me when I was younger and chasing strength without understanding cost. When you eat protein, your digestive system begins breaking it down in the stomach with acid and enzymes, then further in the small intestine into amino acids. These amino acids are absorbed into the bloodstream and delivered to tissues that need them: muscles, organs, immune cells. This is the beneficial phase, the part everyone talks about. But here is the critical point. Your body only requires a finite amount of amino acids at any given time. Once those needs are met, the surplus does not pause or wait. It must be processed immediately. That processing begins in the liver, one of the most metabolically active organs you have. The liver performs deamination, removing the nitrogen group from amino acids. Nitrogen, in its free form, is toxic to the body, so it must be converted into a safer compound, urea. This process is part of what is called the urea cycle, a tightly regulated biochemical pathway. Now, imagine increasing your protein intake day after day. You are not just feeding your muscles, you are accelerating this cycle continuously. The liver must work harder, not because something is wrong, but because you are giving it more work than necessary. I remember a period in my life when I felt constantly on. My body felt active, my digestion always engaged, but there was a subtle heaviness beneath it. That heaviness, I later understood, was metabolic load. The body was busy processing excess rather than simply maintaining balance. And when the liver converts nitrogen into urea, that urea must travel through the bloodstream to the kidneys, where the next phase begins. The kidneys are remarkable filters. They regulate fluid balance, electrolytes, and remove waste, but their capacity is not infinite. With higher protein intake, blood urea nitrogen levels increase, and the kidneys must filter more to maintain equilibrium. This increases something called the glomerular filtration rate. In the short term, the body adapts. It always does. But adaptation is not the same as optimization. It is simply survival within a new demand. Now consider hydration. Urea excretion requires water. The more urea produced, the more water your body needs to safely eliminate it. If hydration is insufficient, and many people underestimate this, the blood becomes more concentrated and the kidneys must work even harder. I recall feeling persistent dryness, a kind of internal thirst that water alone didn't seem to fully resolve. It wasn't until much later that I realized I was asking my body to eliminate more waste than my daily habits could support. But the story does not end with the liver and kidneys. There is another layer, one that is often misunderstood. Energy metabolism. When protein intake exceeds what is needed for repair and maintenance, the body does not simply discard it. Some amino acids are converted into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. This is the body's way of maintaining blood sugar levels when necessary. However, when this process becomes frequent due to excess intake, it can subtly shift metabolic balance. You are no longer just using protein for structure. You are using it as an inefficient energy source, and inefficiency always has a cost. Converting protein into glucose requires more energy than using carbohydrates directly. It also produces more metabolic waste. Over time, this can contribute to a sense of fatigue that is difficult to explain. I remember days when I felt full, well-fed, yet oddly low in energy. It was confusing at the time. Now I understand. The body was working harder to do something it was never meant to do in excess. There is also the matter of dietary imbalance. High-protein diets often displace other essential nutrients. Fiber intake tends to decrease, especially when protein comes primarily from animal sources. Fiber is not just about digestion. It feeds the microbiome, supports gut health, and helps regulate blood sugar and cholesterol. When fiber is low, the digestive system changes. Constipation, bloating, and shifts in gut bacteria can occur. I experienced this as a kind of internal discomfort, something I could never quite name but always felt. And then there is fat. Many high-protein foods, particularly from animal sources, come with saturated fat. When consumed in excess, this can influence lipid profiles, inflammation, and cardiovascular health. At the time, I believed I was eating for strength. I did not realize I was also altering other systems that depend on balance just as much as muscle does. But perhaps the most subtle effect of excess protein is how it changes your relationship with hunger and satiety. Protein is highly satiating. It makes you feel full quickly and for longer periods. On the surface, this seems beneficial. But when taken too far, it can suppress natural hunger cues, leading you to eat in a rigid, controlled way rather than in response to your body's actual needs. I lived like that for years, eating by rule, not by awareness. It felt disciplined, but it was disconnected. And let me tell you something important. The body thrives on responsiveness, not rigidity. When you override its signals repeatedly, even with something as praised as protein, you begin to lose touch with what it actually requires. This is not a dramatic failure. It is a gradual drift. Now, I want to be precise here, because this is where nuance matters. Not everyone will experience these effects in the same way. Athletes, for example, have higher protein requirements due to muscle repair and training demands. Their bodies can utilize more protein efficiently. But even then, there is a ceiling. Beyond that ceiling, the same processes apply. Deamination, urea production, kidney filtration. The difference is simply where that threshold lies. For sedentary individuals, that threshold is lower. Yet many follow the same high-protein patterns designed for entirely different lifestyles. This mismatch is where imbalance often begins. The body is given more than it needs, not because it asked for it, but because it was told it should. At 97, I no longer chase extremes. I observe patterns, and the pattern I see is this. The body is incredibly adaptable, but every adaptation carries a cost if sustained unnecessarily. Excess protein does not announce itself with pain or crisis. It operates quietly, increasing workload, shifting balance, and asking your organs to do more than they were designed to do continuously. If you listen closely, you may notice the signs I once ignored: persistent thirst, subtle fatigue, digestive discomfort, a feeling of heaviness despite eating clean. These are not failures, they are messages, and the sooner you understand the language of those messages, the sooner you can return to balance. Because in the end, protein is not your enemy, but excess of anything, even something good, always asks the body to pay a price, and the body, patient as it is, will keep paying until Malone. It asks you to notice. There is something even deeper I must share with you, something that took me decades to understand. Not just what excess protein does to the body, but how slowly and quietly those effects accumulate over time. Because the most dangerous imbalances are not the ones that shock you. They are the ones that adapt with you day after day until they begin to feel normal. You see, the body is extraordinarily forgiving in the short term. You can eat too much protein for days, even weeks, and feel little more than fullness and perhaps a bit of thirst. This is why so many people believe there is no real consequence, but the body's true response unfolds across years, not days. And it unfolds through adaptation, not resistance. One of the first long-term shifts occurs in the kidneys. When protein intake remains consistently high, the kidneys adapt by increasing their filtration capacity. This is known as hyperfiltration. At first, it appears beneficial. The system is keeping up with demand, but understand this clearly. Hyperfiltration is not a sign of improved health. It is a compensatory response. It means the kidneys are working harder, filtering more blood per unit of time to manage the increased waste load. For a while, this works. The body maintains balance. Blood markers may even appear normal. But over many years, especially in individuals with underlying vulnerabilities, aging tissues, mild hypertension, early metabolic dysfunction, this constant overactivity can begin to wear down the delicate filtering structures within the kidneys. I did not feel this happening. No one does. That is what makes it so deceptive. And then there is bone metabolism, a topic rarely explained in simple terms. When protein intake is excessive, especially in diets lacking sufficient fruits and vegetables, the body may experience a shift in acid-base balance. Certain amino acids, particularly sulfur-containing ones found in animal protein, can increase acid load. To buffer this, the body may draw on alkaline reserves, including calcium stored in bones. Now, I want to be precise. Protein itself is not inherently harmful to bones. In fact, in balanced contexts, it supports bone health. But in excess and without proper nutritional balance, it can contribute to subtle mineral loss over time. At my age, I have seen many women, myself included, face the consequences of fragile bones, and rarely does anyone trace it back to decades of imbalance. It is never one cause. It is always a pattern. Then we must speak about the cardiovascular system. High-protein diets, particularly those centered around red and processed meats, often come with increased intake of saturated fats and certain compounds that influence inflammation. Over time, this can affect lipid profiles, arterial health, and systemic inflammation. Again, this is not immediate. It is cumulative. You feel strong while you are building muscle, but strength is not the same as internal harmony. I remember believing that as long as I looked healthy, I was healthy, but the body does not measure itself by appearance. It measures by function, by how efficiently systems communicate, regulate, and repair. Excess protein, especially when it displaces other nutrients, can disrupt that quiet coordination. Let us return for a moment to the gut, because this is where so many long-term imbalances begin. When protein intake is very high and fiber intake is low, undigested protein can reach the large intestine, where it is fermented by certain bacteria. This process produces compounds like ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and other metabolites that, in excess, may irritate the gut lining and alter the microbial environment. Over time, this can shift the balance of your microbiome, the very ecosystem that influences digestion, immunity, even mood. I did not know the word microbiome when I was younger, but I knew what it felt like to have a body that no longer digested food with ease. There was a heaviness, a discomfort, a sense that something was not quite right. Now I understand that the gut is not just a passive system, it is a living network, and what you feed it shapes how it behaves. And then there is the matter of metabolic signaling, something far more subtle, yet profoundly important. Protein intake stimulates pathways in the body related to growth, particularly a pathway known as mTOR. This pathway plays a role in cell growth, repair, and proliferation. In youth and in periods of recovery, this is beneficial. But chronic overactivation, especially later in life, may contribute to accelerated aging processes. The body, in a sense, is being told to remain in a constant state of growth rather than maintenance and repair. At 97, I can tell you this: longevity is not about constant growth. It is about balance between building and preserving. When one dominates for too long, the system becomes strained. There is also the misconception that more protein always equals more muscle. This is simply not how the body works. Muscle protein synthesis has a limit. Beyond a certain intake, additional protein does not increase muscle growth. It only increases oxidation and waste production. I wish I had known that earlier. I spent years believing I was investing in strength, when in reality I was exceeding what my body could meaningfully use. And let me speak honestly about something else: the psychological layer. High-protein diets often come with a sense of control. You follow rules, track intake, measure portions. It feels structured, disciplined, but over time, this can create a rigid relationship with food, where eating becomes less about nourishment and more about compliance. I lived in that mindset for years, believing I was doing everything right. and a 1 sec a. But the body does not respond to rules, it responds to balance. As the years passed, I began to notice a shift, not just physically, but in how I understood health. I realized that true well-being is not built on maximizing one nutrient. It is built on integration, how proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and water all work together. When one element dominates excessively, the harmony is lost. Now, I want to be clear again. Protein is essential. Without it, the body cannot repair, cannot maintain muscle, cannot sustain life. But the question is never whether something is good. The question is always how much, in what context, and for whom. For a young athlete training intensely, higher protein intake may be appropriate. For an older adult with reduced kidney function, it may need to be moderated. For someone eating a plant-based diet rich in fiber and micronutrients, the effects may differ from someone consuming large amounts of processed meats. Context shapes outcome. This is why the title you heard, What Happens When Your Body Consumes Too Much Protein? Cannot be answered with a single sentence. It is a cascade, a chain of processes that begin with digestion and extend into metabolism, organ function, long-term adaptation, and even aging pathways. And here is the truth I carry with me now. The body rarely punishes you immediately for excess. It accommodates, adjusts, compensates. But every compensation is a form of borrowed balance, and eventually the body asks for that balance to be restored. If you are listening to me now, do not wait for discomfort to become undeniable. Pay attention to the subtle signs. The way your body feels after meals, your energy levels, your hydration, your digestion. These are not small details. They are feedback. At 97, I no longer seek to optimize one part of my body at the expense of another. I seek equilibrium. I eat enough protein to support my strength, but not so much that my body must struggle to process it. I include fiber. I respect hydration. I allow variety. And most importantly, I listen, because the greatest lesson I have learned is this: the body is always speaking. Excess protein is not just a nutritional issue. It is a reminder that even the most praised habits can become harmful when they lose balance. And once you understand that, you stop chasing more, and you begin honoring enough. So what happens when your body consumes too much protein? After everything I have lived, after everything I have quietly observed within my own body over nearly a century, the answer is no longer abstract to me. It is simple, but not simplistic. The body does not reject excess protein with drama. It absorbs it, processes it, and carries the burden of it day after day until that burden becomes your new normal. Excess protein turns nourishment into workload. The liver must continuously convert surplus amino acids through the urea cycle. The kidneys must filter and eliminate that waste with increasing demand. Your need for water rises, your metabolic processes become less efficient, and your internal balance begins to shift in ways you may not immediately feel. Over time, what once supported you begins to quietly strain you. But here is the most important truth I can offer you. The issue is not protein itself. It is the loss of proportion. The body thrives on precision. It needs enough protein to repair, to maintain muscle, to sustain life, but not so much that every system must work harder than necessary just to keep up. There is a threshold, and beyond that threshold, benefit does not increase, only effort does. At 97, I no longer believe in extremes. I no longer chase the idea that more discipline, more restriction, or more of any single nutrient will lead to better health. I have learned that the body rewards balance, not excess. It responds best when it is supported, not pushed. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: pay attention to what your body is quietly telling you. Notice your thirst, your digestion, your energy, your sense of ease after eating. These are not random sensations. They are signals, early, gentle signals that guide you back to equilibrium if you are willing to listen. Understand your needs. They are not the same as someone else's: a young athlete, an aging body, a sedentary lifestyle, a plant-based diet. Each of these changes how much protein is appropriate. There is no universal number that fits everyone. There is only the relationship between your body and what you give it. And perhaps most importantly, do not confuse fullness with nourishment. I did that for years. I believed that feeling full meant I was giving my body what it needed. But true nourishment is not measured by how heavy you feel. It is measured by how well your body functions afterward, how light, how stable, how quietly efficient everything becomes. Now, at the end of my life, my approach is simple. I eat enough, not as little as fear might suggest, and not as much as ambition once demanded. Enough to support my strength, enough to maintain my body, enough to live with clarity and ease. And in that enough, I have found something I never found in excess: peace. Your body does not need you to give it more. It needs you to understand when it has had enough.